Thank you. Thank you, sir. Thank you. Yeah. Yeah. I hope the screen is visible to all of you. Yeah. Is it visible? Uh, yeah. Screen is visible to all of you. Please confirm if. Right. Right. Thank you. Right. So, good evening, all. On the first day of this faculty development program on how to apply for a research grant, and with that following aspect, the first portion that we have to cover is when we are writing for a grant, we should know that we should have some base of research. We have to have some research authentication and orientation, right? So that we would be able to justify our grant in a proper manner. Right. So second day would be cover, how to write a grant, where to apply for the grants. But before that, when we are applying for this kind of, stuff, it is very important that, we have our proposal, we have our structure in a proper way, in a scientific way, in a research language. And to shape up those things, it is very, very important, that we should learn the basic fundamentals, that how to write a research paper. So it is very, very important point of view from all of us, right? So with that note, let's begin with this presentation. So research always comes with, the curiosity, the observation, and something which has not been invented previously. So here the difference and the discussion point over here is something not invented previously. That doesn't mean that we are inventing something. But even though things which has been invented, but if we feel that we can make some different combination, we can make some different equations, we can make some addition and deduction in the equations, so that way it makes certain difference, and that is where the point and the purpose that will come in front of us, that is the research idea generation, right? So we have to generate the research idea, on which topic we have to work, right? On which topic we have to do the research, and to proceed with those research, how to generate the research idea. So this is called the research idea generation. So that is what we have to see to it. So research generation is always comes from the observation, and observation always comes from the literature, right? So whenever we are talking about the idea generation, in second term it is called research problem, right? In third term it is called research gap, right? So all these parameters will always comes from the systematic literature review that we are doing it, and what we are expecting as a part of our own research or our own invention. So the difference between those points, the gap between those points is considered to be research idea generation, research gap, or you can say problem statements, right? So research idea generation is the first aspect to do this. So with that consideration of research idea generation, so the topic for today's discussion is how to write a research paper. So this is a complete bird overview, the complete process of research, in front of you, how to write research, how to proceed with the research, what sort of parameters that we have to take care, So this is what it has been mentioned. So roughly we have seen that, research idea. So research idea means, day to day we have certain observations, when we are deciding to do the research on certain topic or certain area, we must know that, we had certain observations in the past. We might have faced certain problems in the past. And with that consideration of the observations and problem, we want to come out with a fruitful solution, so that is called research idea. So somebody, would say that, write a research title, so this is a usual questions for all the faculties, all the researchers who are starting their research journey in the beginning area. But gradually, this is where you have to ask yourself and you have to get the solutions also for this kind of questions. So when I'm talking about research idea, so research idea always comes from my own observations, my own literatures, my own studies, my own readings. And then I decide that, these are the research which has happened and these are the areas where research has not been much happened. And this is how the new flavors of the research I can add upon it, right? So this is how the research idea can be generated, right? So research idea is coming from the observation, learning, readings, all these aspects. To justify those research idea, so when the researcher is having a question that what should be the ideal title for my research, what should be the ideal way to do the research. So this always comes from the appropriate and systematic literature review. We have to do the literature review very systematically, right? We have to collect all those variables on which we want to do the research, right? So that is what I'm trying to say, that sometimes people are having a question that what should be the ideal title for my research work. So research work should always have the title based on the variables that you want to study for your research, right? So literature review should always be done based on the variables that you are trying to prove as a part of your research work, right? So that is where we have to do the literature review. And literature review is followed by theoretical formation of the research problems. So when literature review, we have already gone through it, we have already identified that what previous researcher has done on this particular topic. And being a fresh researcher and being a new researcher on this particular topic, what is our expectations to find out on this research aspect? So research grant, that you are going to study tomorrow also. So this is also focusing on the same aspect, so where the funding agencies are ready to give you the grants for the research work, so we need to understand that, why the agency will give you the fundings, if the things which has already been done and the same idea you are portraying in front of those agencies again and again, so they're not interested to do the funding because already so many expenses have already been incurred by the previous researcher and so many outcomes and findings has already been arrived, by the previous researcher. And the same thing you are repeating on this aspect. So funding agencies, government, and all the companies who know that particular outcomes of the research. So if you are coming out with the same problem, then it is not going to work out. Rather, I cannot say that this is a problem, right? But this is a problem of other researchers that you are again, trying to copy and paste. So your research problem, your research idea should be something different than what previously has been done. So that is where the theoretical formulations of the research problem needs to be done. And that always comes from the gap that you are identifying from the literature review that you have to do and research idea that we have generated. Right. So that is what it's called, the formulation of research problem. Based on those research problems, we need to identify the particular research questions on which we have to do the research. So that is what it's called, empirical research questions. We need to find it out. So theoretical formulations of the research problem that we have to do. And based on that, certain research questions, which is empirical. What is empirical? Based on the previous studies, based on the past histories, right? So that is where you have to, make empirical research questions that needs to be answered, right? So these research questions, that will reflect to the problem of research that you want to portray. that you want to highlight, in front of the reader, as and when your work is going to be published, or as and when your work needs to be submitted to the certain authorities or agencies to whom you are answerable for the fundings that we have received, right? So that is where research questions needs to be identified. So that is what it's called, the operationalization of the entire research strategy that we have to decide at this particular point, right? So that is what it's called, empirical research questions. That is called the operationalization stage of the research. Then after, we have to come to the next point, where we have to make a complete planning of the research journey. So we have already decided what sort of questions that we want to ask to our target respondent, or if we are not going with the survey methods or interview methods, which is considered to be the primary research methods for the data collections for the researcher's point of view, then the second aspect is, as a part of research design, we need to decide certain variables. And on those variables, we have to get some data, from various agencies, various portals, through which we would able to get the data for our research work. So that is where we have to design the research, right? That, we are going to cover up any of the variables out of the multiple choice that we have it, or our choice is very limited to specific areas or domains of the variables, right? So this is how the research design needs to be identified. And based on that, so many things, so many parameters we are going to decide, like, by going to the next point, are you going to cover up the respondent from multiple locations at multiple time periods? Are you going to cover up the respondent from multiple location for single time period? Are you not going to cover up from the respondent, but you are taking the responses from the online portals? So based on that, your research design is going to be bifurcated. Like, if you're going for historical data in finance, medical science, right? So this is called longitudinal study or experimental studies, if it is in medical science. Then if you're going for marketing HR, where you are covering the primary data through questionnaires or through interviews, so it is called, exploratory cross-sectional studies, where you are describing the reasons for having certain incident, or, certain plannings or certain events that you need to justify as a part of your study. So this is called research design, right? So that is how you have to plan. And research design also consists of, number of samples that you have to cover up. Are you going to cover 500 samples? Are you going to cover 1,000 samples, 1,500 samples, and so on, right? So that is how the sample size needs to be decided, right? So this is called research design. Once the research design has been finalized, right, you need to have data collections, right? You have to collect data, right, for your research. Are you going to cover up the data through, just like, once you have decided your research design, through the identification of the variables that you need to cover up for your research funding projects or grants that you have to write, then you have to decide the various methods for data collection that you need to, incorporate as a part of your study. So data collection that you have to do, are you going to cover up the data from primary research? Are you going to cover up your data from secondary research? If you are going for primary, are you going for questionnaire? Are you going for interview? Mail questionnaire, email questionnaire, So lot many things are there. Secondary data, in terms of, are you referring any journals, or are you covering any numerical data for your research work, right? So that is how the data collection needs to be done, right? So based on data collections that you have done, you have to evaluate the data analysis, right? So you have to do the data analysis based on the data that you have covered up. So here you have to have a data collection, and based on whatever data that you have collected, you need to make certain analysis on this particular data. And this analysis is going to differ from different studies to studies. I cannot say that my data analysis for all the studies would be same, but it is going to differ from objective to objective, parameters to parameters, and the types of data that I'm covering for my research work. So that is how the data analysis needs to be done if I'm going to study for, demographic profile. So again, the data analysis tool will be different, like, frequency analysis, descriptive statistics. If I'm going to see the relationship between anything, so I can go for correlations, regressions, and sometimes I can go for the structure equation modelings in terms of confirmatory factor analysis. So this is how the types of data, the objectives behind doing this particular data collection and this particular research activities, So according to that, the data analysis tools and techniques are going to be differ from each and every parameters. And once the data analysis tools and techniques have been applied, you are trying to answer those empirical questions for the research. So if those data analysis has been done, after that analysis, you might have certain results in your hands. And those results is nothing but the reflections of the answers of the questions that you are looking for, right? So at this stage, this is a stage of the particular answers that you are already finding out for certain research questions, and those research questions we have already framed based on the problems that we have defined, and those problems we have derived from systematic literature review, and literature review we have already done for the basic research idea that we have done, right? So you can see the relations between all those scientific parameters in the research journey. And believe me, all those parameters have been properly executed in your research projects, in your research project, in research papers in the proper manner or not. It has been systematically monitored by all the editors and reviewers who are going to assess your research work. So that is where we have to see that, have you answered those questions for the research or not? So here is the answering the empirical research questions. And based on the answers that you are giving for the empirical research questions, so theoretical interpretations of the results we have to derive, right? So here we have to derive theoretical interpretations of the results that we have received for this particular research. And based on that, whatever interpretation that we have derived, right? So that interpretation, we have to make comparison with other research. So here we are discussing, or you can make comparative study, what difference your research is making in comparison to the previous researcher. So in a layman sense, there would be one section in your research project grant, wherever you are applying. So they are asking the unique features of your research, or rather I can say in simple word, societal importance of your research, or in a third language, managerial implications of your research, right? So where your research is standing in terms of unique, right, with the comparison to the other researchers in the market. So that is how you can differentiate your results with the others. And finally, with the comparisons that you have, made it with the other researcher and the features that you found to be unique, you finally needs to conclude, right, what exactly your research has done and what exactly it is communicating to the society. So this is where it is going to be conclusions, right? So here you have to make the conclusions for your research work, right? What exactly your research is concluding out of all the discussion point. So this is what it's called, cyclical process of research, right? Where each and every parameters needs to be answered in a proper way. So that is where it is called research idea, literature review, theoretical formation of research problems, empirical research question designing, right? Based on research questions, you need to have research design, then data collections that you have to do it from different sources, different parameters. Data collection would be followed by data analysis, and data analysis leads to answering those research questions that you have derived from the problems of research, and that would be able to answer those theoretical questions. And finally, you made an analysis and try to make a comparison with other researchers, and finally you will try to make a conclusions finally for all the research work that we have done it. So this is how the research process needs to be answered. So if I need to structurize any research paper, or in terms of research grant that you are going to follow. So this is a key points that every research projects or research papers needs to be deployed as a part of key areas of research. So which is first part is the abstract of the research, keywords and introduction, literature review, methodology, data analysis and interpretation, finding, conclusion and recommendation. So these two things are, obviously you people are aware about it, but just to have understanding again. So this is a common things where every research paper needs to be derived. And then it has to be followed by the various chapter schemes, like, this is chapter number 1. Or if it is research paper, then part number 1, part number 2, 3, 4, 5, part number 5, and part number 6. Clear? So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. Right. So every chapters has their own features and their own coverage as far as research is concerned. Somebody might ask what should be the part of introduction, what somebody might ask what should be the part of literature review. Right. So there are multiple parameters and multiple things that we need to cover up in each of the parts, and that we have to describe in a proper manner. So let's say if I'm asking you what is the part of introduction, right? So let's say what should be the part of introduction, right? So introduction should always covers all the parameters of variables. Let's say if my title for my research work is if I want to measure the behavioral finance, right? I want to measure the behavioral finance. That means I want to measure the behavior of investors towards the stock market, right? So in a layman title, I'm not deciding my final title. In this slides, we have decided like research idea. So that is where research idea. That is where we were talking about the title. But whenever you are starting this particular journey of research by followed by literature review, so your final title is not in your hands. You will receive the final title after doing systematic literature review, followed by the research questions at least. But still, your title is not finalized until you have not made the theoretical interpretation and conclusion of your research. And based on conclusion, there should be some relation or interrelation between your conclusion and research idea. And that is where you are trying to justify all sort of research grants, all sort of research projects that you are portraying in front of society that should be answered. If you are failed to do this particular process, right, then your idea is not justified, the title is not justified, the entire process you have done is not according to the manner it has to be in a scientific and significant manner, right? So if at all anywhere you are bridging those particular sequences, you might feel certain problems, and that problems needs to be addressed. Yeah. So introduction should always covers the variables that you want to cover up. Let's say if my title is a study on different behavioral biases, right, in Madhya Pradesh, or so something like that. So what I need to do is I'm trying to see the investors' behavior, so behavioral biases towards the investors. So I'm checking the behavior of investors. So behavior of investors should be one variable. Those behavior can be bifurcated into multiple categories. So all those categories we have to cover up, right? And those categorical behavior and interpretation, we have to see that how this behavior leads to the decision making for the investors. So we also have to cover up as a part of investors, right? And what parameters of investors that we need to cover up as a part of influencing factors for the behavior. And finally, how the market is running in with the consideration of all those parameters on a day-to-day basis. And so if you need to make your chapterization scheme for introduction, so these are the kind of sub points that we as a writers, we as a researcher needs to take care. Right. So these are the parameters we need to cover up as a part of our research, right? So that is what it's called introduction. And what is literature review? So literature review is basically the past research which has happened in the market. When I'm saying this past research, so this past research is nothing but the previous researcher who has made a contribution in this particular area. Now, many a times I am receiving, out of my all the sessions, and even after the sessions, I'm getting, personal queries from the participants as well. That how to do the literature review. Let's say if I'm deciding my title, but based on the title, if I'm going for my literature review, so I'm not getting the literature review exactly the title that I'm trying to cover, or exactly the number of variables that I'm trying to cover as a part of my study. So obviously it is not going to happen. So rather than making all the variables together in this particular, you cannot make force to the other researcher that, why have not covered all these parameters in your research, although I want to cover up all these parameters. We can't do that because previous researcher has not done the research based on what you are going to do in the future, but they have done the research based on what they feel at that time to do the research on this particular problem. So rather than making force to the previous researcher, we should make subcategories, and based on the subcategories, we will try to cover up each of these categories as a part of our own literature review. So that is where, we will try to cover up the ideas of all the parameters, all the things that we have to see to it. And according to that, we can proceed with the literature review. Right. So this is how the literature review needs to be done. Then third parameter is research methodology. Very, very important. So at this stage, research methodology cover multiple things in terms of research problems, scope of the study, objectives of the study, hypothesis of the study. Then I can say data collection tools and techniques of this study, data analysis tools and techniques of this study, ethical considerations of this study, limitations of this study, variables of this study, sampling techniques of this study, research designs of this study. Right. So these are the significant parts of the research methodology that we have to do it. Data analysis and interpretations, obviously, this is a common and most significant part of all the research journey. So based on the number of objectives that we have decided, according to that, we need to proceed for all the sort of data analysis and interpretations that we have to do it. And whatever data analysis and interpretation that we are doing it, we also have to make the findings and conclusions out of all this analysis and interpretation. So we also have to see and work out in terms of findings and conclusions that we are going to do it. And finally, with those considerations, we also need to go for the recommendations of the study. Right. So finally, as I already mentioned that, ultimately we need to bridge the gap between all this process. So ultimately we need to make some findings and conclusion or recommendations to the society that, if you are going for this particular research work, right? So what ultimately you are recommending to the society, what exactly you are getting out of this particular process. So this is where we have to make the recommendations to the society, right? So this is called recommendations of this study. So, research methodology, so when we are trying to do the research work, research papers, or, as a part of taking a grant from the various agencies, usually the methodology can be bifurcated. Normally 90 to 95% is in qualitative and quantitative. Now we have to categorize and we have to differentiate between, what is qualitative research design? So qualitative research design is basically focused upon qualitative aspect. That means whatever things we are doing it as a part of quality in terms of, if we are taking some opinions, if we are recording some speech, if we are doing some, recordings of certain aspects, if we are taking the opinions of certain peoples, which is not in numbers, which is not in digits, right? And if we want to connect or if we want to collect those kind of data, so usually we have to do the qualitative research design. And if I need to talk about the quantitative research design, so quantitative research is always happening in numbers, which is pure digits, pure data, numbers. So that is how we have to do the quantitative research design. So this can be done based on data collections that we have to do, right? How we are collecting data, all this aspect that we have to see to it, right? So either it is qualitative or it should be quantitative. So what is qualitative and quantitative research? So qualitative research generally deals in words, images, and the subjective, right? So based on this, qualitative research generally deals in words, images, and the subjective. So we have to proceed these things in terms of all the qualitative manners that we have to think about it, what we are thinking, what we are speaking, what thoughts we have it, for different situation, different perspective. So that is where it have to think about the qualitative manner. And quantitative usually deals in numbers, which is in pure numbers. So that is where we have to deal in numbers and we have to deal in logics and sequences through which the objectives can be met up, right? So that is what it's called, the quantitative research, right? So quantitative research usually deals in number and it's always gives the answers. It always gives the directions of the research to the logical and, some facts and figures manner, so that the acceptance level for the findings and conclusion for quantitative research is always be on the higher side, when we are putting our research work into the operational manner. So always think about it, the relevance of qualitative research in terms of personal opinion, behavior have been dragged by so many factors, which is not somehow reliable. But if you are looking for those fundings and all this aspect, and if you are carrying your research work research papers on the quantitative ground, then the acceptance is very high. I'm not saying that qualitative research is bad. Even qualitative research are also being published in good quality journals like Scopus, ABDC, Web of Science. And nowadays, there is one important tool like, we are using like what I can say is bibliometrics analysis through, BibTeX bibliometrics analysis you are using for qualitative research, and they are getting published in good reputed journals also. But as far as the research fundings is concerned, so fundings are always going to be dealt with some logic, sequence, behavior, right? And ultimately the convincing things that we have to deploy in front of the selectors. So that is where the quantitative research is going to be help you out like n number of times as a part of getting those fundings projects, and at the same time even to justify your funding projects at the end of the scenario or the time period. So what qualitative research is all about? It about the range of activities from starting from exploratory designs to means of completing explanations. Qualitative research also assumes that people have meaningful actions or experiences that can be interpreted, right? So people's actions should be meaningful, having experience that should be interpreted in a logical sequence. Where to collect the data for qualitative research? If you want to collect the data for qualitative research, so where to collect? And it popularly comes from, which are the various sources through which we can collect the qualitative research data. So it always comes from the economical point of view, so if you are taking some opinions from the economical point of view, like, if I want to take an opinion for, Indian economy, Indian policies, so you will find n number of people, who have their own opinions and they want to discuss on this particular aspect. Secondly, it is a flexible, so everyone can do it and everyone have their own interpretation, everyone have their own understanding, because there is no particular measurement, for the opinion of the people that it is correct or it is not correct. It is just a situation based that we are accepting particular situation and we are rejecting particular situation, right? So it is almost flexible in a nature. So, the qualitative research where the data collections are always flexible means you don't have to do much efforts. Even you can find out the data in a very easiest manner, because if you want to interview 5 peoples, it's always better rather than to collect the data collections from the 5 people, right? So it is a flexible and less costly also. Opens the door to why and how, right? So you can always start your data collection by taking the opinion of the people, by asking the reasons in terms of why it has happened, how it has happened, so you can always start with those questions, and so that is how the people will start giving their opinions, and according to that we will also start receiving the data that we are looking for, right? So that is where it is opens the door to why and how. Richness of data, richness in terms of, even if you are collecting those data from higher authorities, or some governmental agencies people, where you will get, clue to clue data, and you will try to go get those responses. So obviously you will try to reach out to the nearest to the problem of the, research that you are looking for. So that is where it is high in terms of richness of data. And even if you are starting your research journey for the first time, right? So it is always best to start with your research journey where you don't have to make so many efforts, but you just have to collect the data from the people by interviewing them, and you can ask their opinion on the particular situation. So if you are new and fresh to the situations of, the research journey, so you can always start your research journey with qualitative data, qualitative research. So quantitative research, if you want to do it, so it should always start with the survey. So quantitative research, again, it is a part of qualitative research, but still we are taking those data in terms of close-ended questions, and all those categories of the options that we are giving to our respondent, we will try to cover up them into numerical form. So that is where we can cover up into numeric form. So on the screen, that whatever things that you are, looking at all those parameters. So this is all is the part of, primary research, primary data collections. That is through which the people are covering their responses, but the people are covering their data, and those data can be converted, those data can be coded, decoded into numerics, and can be converted into quantitative data, right? So quantitative research usually happens with the surveys. So comparison between qualitative and quantitative research, if you have to do it. So qualitative research and quantitative research is right. So firstly is in terms of research objectives. So it basically differs of new ideas, insights, and feelings. So obviously, when we are taking the qualitative data, so qualitative data always given in terms of opinions and suggestions. And these opinions and suggestions are nothing but what people feels about certain situation and scenario. So this always gives some new ideas and insight and feelings about the people. So obviously it is focusing upon some human aspects, psychological parameters. And quantitative is about the validation of facts, estimates, and relationship. So if you want to validate some facts and figures, some estimations, relationship among the different variables, so here we have to do the validation of facts, estimations, and relationship. Type of research for qualitative is usually exploratory. We are trying to explore certain situations, we are trying to see why it is happening, how it is happening, although we were not aware about it, but we are taking the opinions in terms of why and how. So it is exploratory. And quantitative is knowing the situations, and usually quantitative research is focusing upon why it is happening, you know. So that is where we have to describe the reasons for happening, and those reasons can always be proven and described with some numberings, right? Some facts and figures, right? So that is where it is descriptive and causal effect. So numbers also deal with, when we are dealing with the numbers, so number also try to explain the relationship between if the changes has been happen on one variable, what is the changes is going to be happen on another variable. So that is called cause and effect relationship, right? So this is called causal, right? So which happens in cause and effect relations. So descriptive and causal relations we have to establish as a type of research. Type of questions that we need to ask in this qualitative and quantitative is qualitative usually deals with open-ended and semi-open-ended questions. Usually it is a probing, because you cannot bound people, to have a limited suggestion and opinion, because it is a qualitative where people are free to describe, people are free to express their opinions, suggestions, feelings, emotions that they feel about particular situation and scenario, through which we are ready to take the data on this particular aspect. While in quantitative, people are not given a free birds, because the criterias and parameters have been decided based on which the researcher has to generate the results. So here, mostly the questions that we are asking to the respondent are mostly structured. So here the structured questionnaires needs to be framed. So here is a classification of research designs. So exploratory research design and conclusive. So exploratory research design, we have already discussed that it is going to be applicable for the qualitative research, right? So whenever we are talking about qualitative research, it is already talks about the exploratory, right? We are exploring the reasons for multiple, parameters or multiple variables that we are looking in terms of why it is happening and something. And conclusive research design is always deals in the numbers, where we are trying to on the one hand, we are trying to describe and causal. So descriptive research in terms of conclusive research design. So both is applicable to quantitative research. But in quantitative research also, there are two aspects that we have to look forward. So first is descriptive research. Here we have to describe the reasons for happening certain events, happening certain results, happening certain kind of problems that we have it. So we are trying to describe those results. So that is where we are trying to have a descriptive research, where we are trying to describe the reasons for having such kind of problems. And those descriptive results can be bifurcated into two aspects. One is cross-sectional design and another one is longitudinal design. So cross-sectional means whenever we are going for primary research in terms of, asking questions to the respondent through the questionnaires, right? So we are asking those questionnaires to the multiple people for the same reasons, for the same questions, at the same point of time. So the point of discussion over here is we are asking multiple people to respond on this particular questions on a single period of time. So that is where it is called cross-sectional, right? We are asking to the multiple people, if I'm conducting survey in Madhya Pradesh. So today I'm asking, the time frame is fixed, like, I'm asking today in Indore, today I'm asking in Bhopal, tomorrow asking in Indore, then day after tomorrow I am asking this particular question in Malwa, right? So this is how, within the, let's say 2 months or 3 months time frame, I want to cover up the maximum respondent from the Madhya Pradesh. So I can do this particular exercise. All the questions and purpose of questions are similar, but the respondent are different from different geographical location, but it is covered under single time frame. That doesn't mean that it is on the same day, but it should be in a stipulated time period that we have decided to cover up the particular responses. And longitudinal means it is a long term based, it is a time period based, it is a past based, historical database research that we have to do. So basically it is a longitudinal study. So longitudinal means it is a time based study that we have to do it, based on the past research that we have done it. So this is how longitudinal, scenario that we have to see, let's say, what is the impact of profitability on the sales, or sales on the profitability based on 10 years of performance of the particular stock. So we want to measure the effect of profitability, or, expenses, or P ratios or EPS ratios on the profitability. So we, as an investor, if you want to evaluate that, for this particular stock, which parameters of profitability is going to affect based on past 10 years of data. So I need to go for the regressions in terms of different models of regressions. If I'll go with econometrics model, then, as a part of research grant, because everything needs to be very proper and, systematically. And that should be on a scientific ground. So I can go for ARMA model, ARIMA model, ARCH model, GARCH model, EGARCH model, right? MGARCH model. So many things are there that we can do it to have longitudinal research design, right? So it is based on number. Here, the variable is same, but the data is from different time period. If you remember the cross-sectional, right, the variable is different, but data has been covered from single time period, from different people. Here, same company, same variable, but time frame is different for 10 years, for 5 years, for 20 years. So this is called time period based study, So this is called longitudinal study. Clear? I hope it is clear to all of you. Yes?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Right. And the same longitudinal study, if we want to make in a cause and effect relation in terms of regression models, so we can apply causal research, right? So this is how it is. So statement of problems, whenever we talks about the chapter number 3, that is research methodology in the research projects or research projects, research paper that you are going to draft. So statement of problem, we have already gone through it. Review of previous studies, obviously systematic literature review. So here is, you have to write a glimpse of it, not everything. Scope of study, what exactly this particular study is going to cover in terms of the variables, geographical locations, right? So these are the different scopes that we have to cover up. Based on scopes and problems that we have defined, we need to cover up the objectives of the research. So what sort of objective that this particular research is having? And based on these objectives, we need to define the hypothesis for the particular study. So objectives and hypothesis is direct synchronization in direct relations with each other. Based on what objectives we have framed, according to that, the hypothesis needs to be framed, right? And that's where operational definition of every concept needs to be answered based on how the relation we have trying to establish in terms of proving the objectives, and same we have incorporated in terms of designing the hypothesis for the research projects and research papers. Significance of this study, that what I have tried to convey you, like after the research, what exactly the society is going to be beneficial out of this particular study. So here we have to decide the significance of the research that we have to prove it. Then geographical areas. So as I already mentioned, like say if I'm going to cover up the behavioral finance opinion of the investors, and I'm trying to cover up the responses from the major cities of Madhya Pradesh. So it could be Indore, it should be Jabalpur, it could be I don't know much, like Malwa, whatever next is. So right. So according to that, let's say if I'm talks about Gujarat, so we have Ahmedabad, we have Surat, we have Vadodara, we have Rajkot, so these are the major metro cities in Gujarat. So through which I'm covering those resources. So that things I need to mention that, how different geographical location has been covered to cover up the uniqueness in terms of mindset of the particular people for that particular opinion on which we are making these huge efforts to justify and to provide solutions to the society. Right. So geographical areas needs to be mentioned. Methodology in terms of qualitative, quantitative, sampling plan. So according to the methodology we have decided, so we have to make our sample plan. Sample plans can be in sample size, like say 500, 600, 400, how those samples needs to be covered. As I already mentioned, we are going to cover multiple people at multiple time, multiple people at single point of time, right? So this is how the sampling plan needs to be designed. Tools for gathering data, how we are going to collect those data. Are we going for questions? Are we going to collect the data from the stock market websites, something like that? Or you have any other mode of collection of data according to the stream in which you are, the science in which you are, right? So for medical science, stock market is not going to applicable. So you might have certain agencies through which you can gather the data. So this is how you have two options. Either you can ask the people or you can take the data from the agency. So if you are taking the data from the agency, it is a secondary data. If you are asking those, asking the opinions, behavior kind of thing, so you are taking the opinions of the people. And chapterization schemes, that how the entire research project or research grant is going to explain in all the sequential manner of the research journey, starting from introduction, LR, methodology, data analysis and interpretation, and findings and conclusions. So this is how the chapterization schemes needs to be decided. So this is what the statement of problems, as I already mentioned, we have to define the problems in terms of why it has happened, what happens, right? So this is how the problem needs to be described. And this is usually 1 or 2 paragraphs to explain, not too much lengthy content we needed. To the point, the things which we are going to portray as a part of research problem needs to be defined. Scope of the study. So that is in terms of which research areas or parameters that we are going to study as a part of our research. So this is how the scope of the study needs to be explained, right? So objective based on scope and problems that we have defined in terms of, scope decide where to collect the data, and problem decide for what reason we are doing this particular research. So that should be objective. That is to the point. We have to, there are different type of objectives, and according to that, research reports needs to be prepared. Let's say exploratory research objective, where we are trying to explore some new concept. Just like if I'm doing exploratory factor analysis, under which I'm trying to describe the new factors for my research, and through which questions in the questionnaire should be asked with how many. Clear? And descriptive means I'm trying to describe those factors through confirmatory, right? So that is how, why it has happened. Is it fitting to my model? Even though descriptive in its sense, so many other tools that you can describe, like frequency analysis, descriptive statistics in terms of mean, median, mode, what I can say is maximum value, minimum value, range. So these are multiple tools which you can use, parametric, non-parametric test. Clear? Causal research. So cause and effect always establish the relationship between multiple variables, right? And that is where we have to apply the regression in terms of independent variables and dependent variables. Hypothesis. So based on whatever objective that we have defined, we have to discuss the hypothesis, and hypothesis should be very specific and clear, and it should clearly reflect the objectives of the study that we have defined. It should not be deviating from the objective. It should clearly reflections of the objective that we have decided. So based on all this aspect, we have to establish the relationship between multiple parameters. So hypothesis can be designed in two aspects. One is null hypothesis and another one is alternative. So null hypothesis can be accepted. You can see this particular on the screen. When your p-value is greater than 0.05, let's say if your p-value is 0.060, right? So obviously 0.660 is obviously greater than 0.05. So in this case, your null hypothesis got accepted, but the condition is when you have taken 5% significance level. If at this stage, if you have taken 10% significance level, then the alternate is going to be accepted, because for 0.10, it is obviously less than, right? So depending upon the chances of error level that we have taken up, according to that, the hypothesis acceptance and rejections decisions needs to be taken up. And the same decisions or the same range of significance level, we need to communicate to the researcher and society that we have taken the 5% chances of error or 10% chances of error. Significance of this study, right? So we also have to define that, how this research study is going to be beneficial to the society, so that whosoever the reader is, they will be very clear in terms of how this study is going to be beneficial to them. So this is called significance of the study that we have to define. And we also have to discuss about the techniques to write the significance of the study. So firstly, we have to take the general contribution of the research and then followed by the society. Geographical areas, as I already mentioned, that you have to define in terms of human geography, physical geography, regional geography, and integrated geography. In short, you have to define all the geographical things that you have to cover up, you have to describe. Sampling plan, how the sample plans, how the data needs to be covered, how it needs to be executed from different parameters. You can see this sampling unit, like, you have to choose the population where you have to cover up the data, the number of samples that you need to cover up for these samples, and how the sampling procedures needs to be executed in terms of different methods of population. So this is how different things you have to cover up as a part of sampling plan. Tools for gathering data, you can have a face-to-face interview, you have online interviews, you have phones, you have mails, so through which you can cover up the data for your research. So types of data, basically it is nominal, ordinal, and scale data. Nominal and ordinal is usually for primary research, where we are trying to ask the socio-demographic profile. Let's say if I'm asking gender to any respondent, so the question is, what should I put first, whether male or female? So there is no particular science, there is no particular sequence which defines that male should be first and female should be second. So that is where the sequence does not matter, category does not matter for us. So this is considered to be nominal scale. But if the sequence does matters in terms of, let's say if I need to go for the Likert scale data in terms of strongly disagree, neutral, agree, and strongly agree. So I need to define my sequence scale, and according to that, the logical orders needs to be followed. So that is where it is called ordinal scale data. And ratio scale data means stock prices in terms of numbers, numeric data. So this is how the different types of data needs to be covered up. So this is what independent variable and dependent variable. So in regression, we have to decide. So y is equal to alpha plus beta x1. So y is equal to dependent variable and x is independent variable, right? So we usually try to establish the relationship between the dependent and independent variable. And we know that independent variables are independent from other variables, while dependent variables are having dependency on the independent variable. So independent variables could be 1 also, 2 also, and 3 also. If we have one independent variable and we are applying regression model, so it is called simple regression, and more than one independent variable and still we are applying regression, so it is called multiple regression analysis. Category and continuous, so if the categories in terms of, like, we have male and female, so this is categorical variable. But if we have a continuous variables like, numbers, so that is continuous. And quantitative variables and qualitative, you already know it, like, speech, words, countings are qualitative, and quantitative means numerical data that we are covering from the respondent. Data analysis tools and techniques, the few analysis tools and techniques that you can make a use of research projects and research paper in a useful manner is frequency analysis, descriptive analysis, chi-square test, parametric, non-parametric, exploratory factor analysis, and confirmatory, and followed by the findings and conclusion, and that should be reflected in the research problem. And finally, you should be able to conclude your title on which you are doing the research. Finally, we have to recommend to the society that, out of all these practices, what ultimately you are going to get it out of all these practices, why this research has been conducted, and if at all you are going to read this particular research, what ultimately you are getting out of these all practices. So this is called recommendations of the study. So that's it from my side. Now I'm making this stage open for question answer. If you have any questions, you can ask. Or any query, any suggestions you need to incorporate, you can ask. Yeah, any questions, any suggestions, anything you want to share about your idea, your research work? Any questions? No questions? Okay. So thank you so much, RFI team, for inviting me today. And thank you so much.
Sir, excuse me, sir. It's a wonderful session with lots of clarity in the presentation.
Thank you.
But one thing I need to say that the research design mechanism, generally we do it as no synopsis, isn't it?
Right,
So we say to our students to prepare in that order.
right, right. So research methodology, madam, usually applied to all the aspect. But in terms
Okay.
of synopsis, when we have to apply, no, so synopsis usually avoids, the findings and conclusions,
Yeah, yeah.
right?
That
So
well, we write their expected outcomes.
yeah, definitely.
Yes. Yeah.
In a glimpse
Sir,
of it.
are you working in structural equation modeling using MOS software?
Yeah,
Okay, okay. Sir, I want to collaborate with you, sir. I'm Sujata Das from Birla Institute of Technology, Meshra, Ranchi.
right, right,
So,
right. So you can contact me. I'm putting my number in chat box, so you can meet. You reach out to me after this session. No issue.
okay, sir. Okay, sir. Thank you so much, sir.
Welcome. Yeah, you can take my number in chat box. Yeah. Any other queries? Any query, any suggestions? Like she has asked. So always it comes out with some fruitful solutions. Even sometimes we also came to know. As I always says, research is a collaborative effort. So be in contact, be in touch. So it will be an enjoyable journey for all of us, not for me also. Right. So any questions, any suggestions more? So please ask. Anything about your research work where you face any problems, you can share. Okay, so if you are feeling shy, so even after this session, you can reach out to me. Thank you so much once again, all of you, RFI team, all the participants for your patient listening, and the coordinator for today's event. Thank you so much. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir.
Thank you, madam. Thank you.
Yes, sir. Thank you.